It's all
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Voxology Podcast. I just have to say a couple of things as we get started. First of all, Tim Stafford, your beloved co-host with the co-most, is dressed in baby blues. I mean, like the baby blue UCLA colors right now.
Yeah.
Light blue hat, light blue sweatshirt. And the only way to really appreciate this is to go on YouTube. And
That's right.
Guys, tell us what we can do to make YouTube interesting to you. Because, I mean, I'm sure watching the two of us talk is fascinating, but are there other things that would be great? We'd love to know.
Like puppets.
Have some puppets stylized, one very large bald one and one, bearded Jesus looking one. That would be fantastic. Yes, we're thinking animation. No, we're not. So we're going to dive back into Revelation today, but before we do, we have some laments.
Oh.
So this is Mike's miserable musings and Tim's troubled times combined into both of us just fussing at things. So please bear with me on this, but I open my news, my Twitter news app, and I find out that the SBC, Southern Baptist Convention, has disfellowshipped several churches, including Saddleback, for having women pastors. And this seems like it's the same SBC who recently came under massive amount of scrutiny for the way they've handled sexual abusers and sexual predators and the way that was hidden. And one of the excuses I believe that was made was, hey, we're kind of an independent network of churches, and so we don't really, we don't exercise a lot of central control over our, and I mean, if you're Southern Baptist or know more about this, please correct me or us on this. But it just, on the face of it, from like very far away, it appears that we're willing to disfellowship churches for having women pastors. And there was one disfellowship church for a poorly handling an abuse situation. So I want to acknowledge that too in this disfellowshipping. But again, I am absolutely fascinated by the relentless focus in making sure that women know their place, as opposed to dealing ruthlessly with excising any form of toxic leadership or abuse of power or sexual predators or any of those sorts of things. If they had displayed the same clarity of purpose and willingness to deal with churches that had misbehaved in the same way that they're willing to really go after churches and women who are teaching or letting women teach, I simply, I don't even know what to say. I mean, Tim and I have better things to do than to just be upset at stuff. Well, Tim doesn't. Tim loves being upset at stuff. I have better things to do than being upset at stuff. So between Tim and I, when we're both upset at something, you know it's real. And I don't even have words strong enough. Again, if I may be misunderstanding this. And if so, I will repent in dust and ashes.
Wow.
But yes, and ashes.
That's heavy.
In the articles I'm reading, there seems to be this massive double standard. And when we're watching some of our friends like Beth Allison Barr and Kristen Dumais and Beth Moore get treated horribly by not only the Theo bros out there, but the SBC bros out there, it is absolutely disgusting, and it makes me so furious. I don't even know what to do about it, other than just to say I'm so frustrated, and may God deal with this issue, and go after the root of it, because it is so nasty and so unbiblical and so ungodly. Not just, I mean, if you hold the Bible teaches that women are restricted, I know people who believe that. I used to believe that. So I don't have harsh judgments against that. I think the view is wrong, and I think the view can be and often is harmful, absolutely. But this neglect of the weightier matters of the law for the straining and making sure that women utterly know their place. I mean, Jesus spoke to this so clearly about what this is and represents.
That's worse than neglect. They know about it and they're purposefully hiding it.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the findings.
Yeah.
On this huge report, and yes, so you're right. It's not just neglect.
They're active.
Yeah, it is active. And so again, the world does not need two middle-aged white guys, of which Tim just realized I was referring to him as the second one. He said yesterday, he's like, I've never thought of myself as middle-aged.
I haven't.
How old are you? Can I ask how old are you?
Yeah, I'm 43. I'll be 44 in like a month.
Okay. I mean,
so I'm definitely I'm definitely middle-aged, but I just in my brain I don't think of myself that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't either. I think of myself as 12. Emotionally.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
Just there's been a large body that's grown up around that 12-year-old, but that's kind of it.
You're like Shazam.
So, I don't. Yes, except I don't have to say Shazam. I can just say
maybe you should though.
Butter pecan ice cream.
It's a great thing to shout.
Sure, and if shouting were appropriate, we would be shouting at this.
Would you say ice cream? You can change it to Sherbert.
Yeah, that's the kale of ice cream, by the way. So I don't know. This is so dumb, and I'm not shocked when people look at this and just go, I am out.
Well, it's such a larger net than that too, because there's that happening. There's that pastor that went viral for preaching about like that super hot woman that came up and like propositioned him, and as part of his sermon, and so Beth Allison,
sure,
and then he pushed back on him, and then there was something else yesterday too. It was like, but it's all a series of men.
I got it. So our friend, Dr. Lynn Kohick, who we had on very recently.
That was the other thing.
I think she resigned.
I think so too.
Yesterday, Northern Seminary is a seminary where Dr. Gupta, Dr. McKnight, Dr. Kohick, all sort of lead and teach, and it's known as it's an egalitarian seminary
on paper.
Well, and then we find out the Northern Seminary president, he is on leave after allegations of bullying and retaliation against women. And when you read the report, it's like, well, this seems really damning. And you're right, Tim. It all comes as part of a package.
Yeah, there's a theme here.
Yeah, of just awfulness. And again, I mean, I'm not. Good Lord, I'm certainly not somebody who is perfect in every way, shape, or form. But wow, to deny that there's some sort of systemic issue, it just seems so ridiculous.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I don't know. I just wanted to mention, Tim and I were both, furious. We're fast and furious.
That's right.
And
I was fasting, and then I got furious.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
And then I was fast X, lax.
I was too fast, too furious.
Can I just confess something that will reiterate my middle age status?
Yes.
The two movie franchises that I don't understand how they exist are Transformers and Fast and Furious.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
I don't get it. And again, the world doesn't need our opinion on this.
Yes, they do.
But
and here it is.
And here it is. Those are 2 movie franchises, Tim. Is there a singular movie that you love so much you would want it turned into a franchise?
Wow.
Yeah. This is all, guys, this is unscripted.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Do you have one?
Okay. I wouldn't mind another Gladiator.
Oh man, I read a script that Nick Cave, the musician Nick Cave.
Yes.
He wrote a sequel script years ago. Have you seen that?
Yes, that's the one.
Really good.
Yes, that's the one. So I saw that script and went, "Oh, that
was all in like the afterlife, and
that's right.
Really, really interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be cool. It's hard to make a
got.
sequel to movies where the main character dies at the end. Spoiler if you haven't seen Gladiator.
22 years ago. Yeah, sorry about that. All right, Timothy, anything you want to add to all that nonsense before we dive into
I wish there was some way we could. With my students, I was trying to think about like beliefs that are harmful to people, like beliefs that you hold that are harmful to other people, like ways in which your beliefs subjugate other people, and how to have conversations with family members that are constructive about growing away from those beliefs. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And this kind of thing, like seeing all of this male abuse across the board just this week. Like this isn't like this is all just in the last like 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of it. I'm saying this as a white male. I'm well aware that I'm not affected. But watching Beth Allison Barr on Twitter just continually lament and fight back against all this stuff, like I can't imagine how exhausted she is. Like you mentioned, in Kohik, and no one wants to have to leave their. I don't know. There's just these women are just getting pummeled over and over and over again, and they still keep like trying to be positive and be like in the mix of making a better world for everybody, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
So I wish there was a way to just unplug all these dudes, put them on an island, put them on like a love cruise or something. Let them
just go Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
It's just so gross. It's just disgusting. I'm sick of it.
Yeah. Well, and both of us having daughters, it's And I'm
we have fiery daughters too, so when they're the adults, I'm less worried about them.
Well, that's very true. Yes. Yeah. Hannah, Mazzy and Hannah are going to be BFFs when they're adults because they are the same person.
We'll take on the world.
It's really funny. Yes. Yeah. There's your president and vice president ticket.
There it is.
2060.
No
right
one's
there.
Gonna mess with them.
All right, Tim.
All right.
Let's do some revelations, which is wrong.
Wrong.
One revelation. Apocalypsis is singular. And so this is one revelation from Jesus. So like we talked about last time we were in the book, the whole, and this is true of most of the Bible, the assumptions that you make going in determine a great deal the range of interpretive options you have when you approach it.
Yeah.
And this is true of everybody. We all go to the Bible with certain assumptions, and the best and most faithful Bible readings are just the ones that don't get rid of assumptions, because we can't. Getting rid of an assumption kind of builds its own assumption, and but the most faithful Bible readings are built on the constant interrogation of our assumptions that are brought to the text. And so people will say, well, listen, how come so many of us kind of bought the left behind view of Revelation if it was so wrong? And who are you to just stand over it and say, yeah, all of this interpretation is incorrect? And the answer, of course, is that the understanding of Revelation is the product of a way of reading the Bible and an understanding of what the Bible is and how it functions that leads you naturally to read the Bible in that way. And so to come up with different understandings and faithful readings of the text, you have to start from different places. And this, of course, is where, man, so much of the really high-level scholarly debate resides, is what is the Bible? How does it work? What's it for? Why did God give us this text, or did he, or she, or it, or whoever, right? And so we've been spending a little time on the genre clues that Revelation gives to us about what kind of literature it is.
Yeah.
And then we're exploring other examples of that kind of literature to inform how it is that we understand Revelation. So the first point we made is that literally the first word in Greek is this word apocalypse, and it means to uncover or to reveal. It's when you suddenly see the true nature of something that you couldn't see before. It was hidden or covered, but now it's revealed. It's when God pulls back kind of the curtain to show what's really going on. And not only is that a word that describes what the revelation is, it's an uncovering of Jesus of Nazareth. It's a revelation from, to, and about Jesus. But it also describes a form of ancient literature that we explored thoroughly last time we were talking about this. So apocalyptic literature, you can go back and listen a bit to the characteristics of that, and that will inform how we understand the numbers and the colors and the years and the dates. I mean, all of this informs how we get to those interpretations. So this, even though it's the least interesting, it is the most important. And that's why I think a lot of us suffer from bad Bible readings, or tolerate them anyway, because we're not paying attention to how the text comes to us. And this is true of me too. I mean, I was a fan of late great Planet Earth, and I was totally fascinated by that sort of thing in college, and everyone around me was fascinated by that sort of thing in college.
What did we just read about that?
What's that?
Didn't we just read an article about? Is that the Hal Lindsey thing?
Oh yeah.
About his kind of journey,
his life.
Yeah, it was really fascinating.
Yeah, it really is.
Do you know when apocalypse, like for us, the term changed from being something about revealing to being like Armageddon, or like the end of the world, or this big like? Because I wonder how much that has also, our understanding of that word has. I wonder if that has changed how we.
Yeah.
Have a, you know what I mean? Because we started to have an Armageddon kind of reading.
Apocalyptic. Apocalypse became the end of time, whereas apocalypse was an unveiling or a revealing. Yep, totally. I don't know when that changed. I mean, I would imagine the less the Western Church became deeply familiar with the Old Testament, the more likely we are to read the New Testament poorly. And so, and we have very passionate public teachers today who say, yeah, the Old Testament should be unhitched from the New Testament. And in a sense, that's true. If you want to learn the story of Jesus, you don't start in Leviticus. Although, I mean, actually that's a great place to start, but you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And he makes some good points. All that is to say that I feel the need to sort of justify why it is that we're taking a slow approach into this. So here are the first 3 verses, and we get 2 genre clues, all right, in these 3 verses about what kind of revelation we're talking about. So verse 1, the revelation, not plural, the revelation from Jesus Christ. There's a big debate about, is it from Jesus or about Jesus, and both turn out to be true, which God gave Jesus to show his servants what must soon take place. Jesus made it known by sending his angel to his servant John. So the order of operations here for my math friends is that the revelation was given to Jesus, who gave it to an angel, who gave it to John. That's the idea. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who testifies to everything he saw. That is the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is a very familiar refrain to Old Testament prophetic literature. that we're going to see in just a second. This is how you introduce prophets and prophetic literature. Blessed, there are 7 times the reader or hearer is blessed in this book, and 7 is going to be a huge number for us. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy. And blessed are those who hear it and take to heart what is written in it, because the time is near. Mm-hmm. Now, there are 2 time references in the first 3 verses. So we're going to have a whole conversation next episode about these 2 references, what must soon take place in verse 1, and because the time is near in verse 3. Because what we want to do with those time references is called calendarizing. We want to start figuring and looking at the historical calendar to figure out when we're talking about this. But there is buried here an assumption that the original audience who would have heard this read would have understood it, because they're blessed if they take it to heart. Yeah. So if this is only something that can be understood in the 21st century or in the 20th century, we're already starting from the wrong place. Now, because John identifies this as a word of prophecy, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy. And this is getting to the point to what you were bringing up with the word right. Apocalypse. So one of the very significant distortions of the whole dispensational approach, at least as it used to be, I don't know how it is these days, but it was the distortion of what prophecy meant and was in the Old Testament. The prophetic literature was not primarily predicting the future. Right. The primary focus of prophetic literature in the Old Testament is the fidelity of God's covenant people. And the warnings come like this: if you don't clean your room, when your dad gets home or your mom gets home, you're going to be in trouble. Right. That's not a predictive prophecy, right? That's right. The warning of consequences. Right. Correct?
Yes.
And so much of prophetic literature comes this way. If you don't, then I will.
Right.
Right? So the goal of prophetic literature in the Old Testament was either A, to comfort, because God's got this and you don't have to make military alliances with other nations, or to warn, hey, if you make military allegiances with other countries, God will ensure that those are the countries that discipline you. But the goal was never the distant future. There are some places where things are referenced in the future, but only to call to the current generation to present fidelity. Right? It never, prophetic literature in the Old Testament never invites a curiosity about what's going to happen in the future. Now, Daniel is an exception to that, because Daniel starts talking about weeks of years and 70 weeks of years, and let's count down, and we're going to spend loads of time in Daniel because Revelation borrows from Daniel heavily. But even in those instances, the point is the current fidelity of God's people, always. It's not about predicting the future. So John sees himself as a prophet and sees his letter as a prophecy, standing in the Old Testament tradition. On 5 occasions, Revelation explicitly calls itself a work of prophecy. So chapter 7, blessed is the one who keeps the words of this prophecy, not chapter 7, verse 7. Verse 10, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of the scroll, because the time is near. Verse, and these are from different chapters, by the way, so I'm sorry, I shouldn't be giving you verse numbers. Thirdly, come, let the one who hears say, come, let the one who is thirsty come, and let the one who wishes I'm such an idiot. That was the second part of the verse I just read. So, the first instance is the one we just read in chapter 1. Right. Then, look, I am coming soon. This is in chapter 22. Blessed is the one who keeps the words of this prophecy. In chapter 22, verse 10, do not seal up the words of this prophecy. In chapter 22, verse 18, if anyone hears the words of this prophecy and adds anything to them, God will add to the person, the plagues described in this scroll. And if anyone takes away the scroll from the scroll of this prophecy, God will take away that person from the tree of life.
How can you unhitch the Old Testament and then have any way of understanding a book like this?
Well, the man who wrote a book on this and said this in a very popular sermon was saying that our faith is not in a book, our faith is in an event. And so much of the trouble that Christians have with the Bible is found in the Old Testament. And I think his argument was a little more sophisticated than that. But the counter is what we're exploring. How in the world do you make any sense of the New Testament without a thorough immersion?
Yeah, and then you look at how this has been used as a weapon in the improper ways, in an improper understanding or whatever. So it's like everything you just said about understanding prophecy, you'd have to have Old Testament, like, I don't know. It's just...
Yeah, exactly. So Revelation refers to itself as a prophecy 5 times. And Revelation characterizes the work of John, the author, as a prophet 4 times. So this isn't buried, in here. Like it's kind of shouting, hey, this is a work of prophecy with apocalyptic elements. Fantastic. And so just to make a couple of points we've already made, but I need to say them again. Prophecy primarily is not prediction. And notice when we introduced the different ways that Revelation is understood, they were all along the lines of prediction. So futurists see the prophecies of Revelation as predictions for the future. Preterists see some of the prophecies as prophecies in the past. And idealists or historicists see some of the prophecies kind of unfolding over the course of church history, either in cycles or very slowly in a linear fashion. But they all deal with, and they're all differentiated by, how do you see the predictions?
Yeah.
So even in delineating the different approaches to revelation, the idea that the predictive part is the most important part is already embedded in the way that we differentiate between how we're to understand it, which, again, to my way of thinking, already starts off on the wrong foot.
Right.
Right? Because, and go ahead and read. I mean, jump into Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. There are so many prophetic elements. That's where I was going. Prophetic elements that are brought forward into Revelation from those great works. And one of the reasons why Revelation is so hard to understand, there are something like 287, I think, direct quotations or use of images that directly borrow from the Old Testament, like 400 allusions that aren't totally explicit, but you can find Old Testament parallels. I mean, it's saturated with Old Testament, and because we don't know Old Testament, we look at Revelation and go, what the heck are they doing and talking about here?
Yeah, grasshoppers.
Yeah. So, Apache helicopters. So, first of all, prophecy is not primarily prediction. It is a call to faithfulness. And I have loads. I mean, I have 9 pages of notes on just what biblical prophecy turns out to be. Pardon me. So the idea is that the visions that are given in biblical prophecy are not to be understood as calendars for the future, but are rather to be understood as, either warnings or comfort that, and there were times, like in the book of Acts, there's a guy that said, there's going to be a famine in Jerusalem, and he prophesies. And that's called prophecy. But in the New Testament, prophecy is also called what people would do when they would just stand up and read a psalm or read a hymn or share something they felt like God was saying to them, right? He calls all of those prophecies too. So that word prophecy is very elastic, but it rarely, if ever, refers to predictive, calendar, future-looking sort of Nostradamus stuff. So if it is Old Testament prophecy, or in that lane, then the book is designed to bring comfort and warning for the people of that generation. And that's what we're going to see. I mean, this is written to that generation. And this is going to be the biggest point.
Yeah.
That as a prophecy and as an apocalypse, the images, we don't rummage around the 20th or 21st century to look for parallels to the images. We look to our Old Testament and we look to Roman imperial propaganda in the first century for parallels. And when we start to do that, what we begin to see is Revelation isn't this fearsome, horrific book, but rather it's designed, as we've said before, to bring comfort to those who are at odds with the status quo, and to bring warning to those who feel quite at home in the status quo. And that's the point of the book.
Yeah.
So if it's not doing that today, then we're misreading it. So the first two genre clues come in the first three verses.
Yeah.
Right? It's an apocalypse and it is a prophecy. Then, and this is the most surprising one, and I years ago I read somebody who was arguing this and went, oh my goodness, this is true. And it just opens up so many things, and there's loads of scholarship obviously behind this. But that
Here's what I found.
my Apple Watch keeps chirping at me. Here's what I found. That's what she said. Here's what I found though, is that Revelation comes as a pastoral letter. And so when we read Philippians or we read Galatians, there is a greeting.
Right.
You know? Paul, to the holy ones at Philippi, grace and peace to you. And then some sort of doxology. You know, I remember you all the time in my prayers as I think about X, Y, and Z. Well, as you read Revelation, here's verse 4. John, to the 7 churches in the province of Asia, grace and peace to you.
Right.
And you're like, hold on a second. And it's not just here. We'll note it all throughout the rest of the letter, that this is to be understood also as an epistle. And so the number one rule when you're looking at Philippians or Galatians or the letters, 1st and 2nd Peter, the number one rule for pastoral letters is that they would have been intelligible to the original audience.
Yeah.
Because they're pastoral letters.
Right.
So it's apocalypse, so it uses all sorts of literary conventions and symbolism. It's a prophecy, which means its orientation is encouraging the current generation to faithfulness. But all of that comes in the form of a pastoral letter.
Yeah.
It ends with, in Revelation 22, he who testifies to these things says, yes, I'm coming soon. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. The grace of the Lord Jesus be with God's people. Amen. Just the way Paul ends some of his letters.
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating. Grace and peace to you from him who was and is to come. And that's actually something that was said of Zeus, which is super interesting.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yes, Zeus was referred to. We have inscriptions where that specific language was applied to Zeus. So grace and peace from him who is, who was, who is to come, and from the 7 spirits before the throne. We'll talk about the 7 spirits later when we get into the 7. And from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful witness, the firstborn from the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth. Then he says, a couple verses later, on the Lord's day I was in the Spirit. I heard behind me like a loud voice. I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet, which said, write on a scroll what you see and send it to 7 churches. And these were literal flesh and blood churches. And it's fascinating when you look at what the letters say to the churches, or these messages to the churches, and what the background is of the cities and the politics of the day. Like, this roots Revelation in flesh and blood. Now, It's also 7 churches, which is a hugely symbolic number. And we know it's symbolic because it's an apocalypse. All the numbers are symbolic in apocalypses, all of them. So we're going to meet 7 spirits, 7 blessings. We're going to meet 7 churches.
John's just having fun. He's just like
7
hey.
bowls, 7 trumpets, 7 seals. And we're going to play with the number 7 a bunch. And so like 3.5 is half of 7. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to use the number 1,000, which is a play on the number 10, which is order. So 1,000 is 10 times 10 times 10. You're going to get the 144,000, which is a bunch of 12s and 7s. And I mean, it's or 12s and 12s from the 12 tribes. I mean, it's like, and to sit there and say, like I've had Jehovah's Witnesses tell me they're working to evangelize people so that they might be one of the 144,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how people got confused by this book.
So
it's important to note that the book does not start John to the churches in the 21st century America.
Yes.
And to Kirk Cameron. Blessings and...
Well, maybe to Nick Cage. It's so funny. I have 9 pages of notes, and the last thing I want to do is like read them and go over them. So the biggest point we need to make today, and it's really simple, is the idea that Revelation would have been understood by its original audience.
Yeah.
And if we carry that assumption in to the rest of the book,
right,
then we will make differing interpretive decisions from those, who assume that yes, maybe it would have made sense, but this was really a code that you need, the 20th century to kind of figure out.
Need Tom Hanks to do it.
Well, yeah, he is the Da Vinci guy. Absolutely. Nick Cage, Kirk Cameron. I mean, that's a great crew to kind of figure out the apocalypse.
Dream
If
team.
I were going to be left behind, Nick Cage is someone I would want to be left behind with.
That's right.
Let's just throw that out there. So the biggest thing is the book itself tells us how to understand the book itself.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to sit when people say, yeah, but how do you know you're right when there are all these different interpretations? I don't. But Revelation tells us what it is, and that's clear to anyone paying attention. And the conventions that go with the genre clues are ways in which we can then, and there are still things, even with all of the work we're doing here, we'll get to some stuff in Revelation and be like, we have no idea what this means.
Yeah.
But what we're not going to do is look for some contemporary fulfillment of this. Instead, we're just going to say, I don't know what this means. The original audience must have known what it means, and we've lost whatever referent that was. Great. But we're not going to be troubled by that, right? Because as I joke around a lot, if I sent you an email that talked about, the great Kobe Bryant, known as the Black Mamba, and his Lakers team was on fire in the early 2000s.
They killed the Celtics.
And somebody reads that 2,000 years from now, and they go, "What?
Why is he celebrating how they killed everybody in Boston?"
Yes,
the giant snake man.
Yes, exactly. So it's one of those, it's one of those
things. Were wild in the 2000s.
They were just murdering each other. Oh, anyway. That's kind of the big point. We don't need to blow it into 9 pages of notes for that.
It is interesting that like the idea of being a disciple and kind of being a student and, what you understand of a student, that they are better when they are involved in asking questions and studying and deciphering and not just sitting there and accepting information without any work.
Yeah.
So things like this just always show me how much more agency we have in our faith, because it's like this is important to understand this, and the book, like you just said, is giving you the clues you need to approach it correctly, but you got to do a little bit of work. There's a little bit of ownership on your part in this, and I think that's a kind of a great thing, because it shows that God is invested in
partnership,
Yeah.
participation.
Which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I do too. I'm very encouraged by that. And it would make sense that you just don't pick up an ancient book and go, "Oh, I got this." You know, we don't do it with Shakespeare. We don't. I mean, right?
Yeah. Well, the fact that as prophetic books that they are talking about, like, warning about something that's going on, like, hey, like the metaphor that you used with the clean your room was a great one. So it's already saying, like, hey, you have, like, it's compelling the reader to something.
Yeah.
And what it's compelling them to is an actionable item, and it's not a because the way that we have kind of read it in the past is it's like, hey, there's a good and evil, and you need to be on the good side, and then point fingers at the evil side, or you know what I mean? It's less participatory and more identifying, like an identity thing.
Yeah.
But by the very nature of what the prophetic books are, it is asking you to do something.
Yes.
So it's just, I don't know. I just think it's very interesting. It's all actionable in every different way.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And then as disciples, we have to figure out, hey, this wasn't written to me.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, there's a difference between having it written to me or having written it for me.
Right.
Right. So I think Revelation has enduring significance.
Totally.
Right. So I can say it was written for me too, right? For the church.
But you have to do that work at first.
Only after
right.
you recognize it was written to someone else.
Yeah.
And we're eavesdropping a bit. And, the big question you've always brought up whenever we get in these conversations is, well, why did God, do it that way?
Yeah.
And, it's what we've called the scandal of historical particularity, that God chose a language, a moment in time, a people to reveal God's self in and through. And that means that to best understand, and not that it's perfect, it's just which are the more faithful postures in approaching the text. Is it the demand that the text conform to modern understandings of science and psychology and ethics, or is it the assumption that the Bible spoke to the people at its time? And the best way to understand what it is saying now is to understand what it also said then.
Yeah.
And to do it in that order.
Yeah.
So
not the other way.
Yeah. I mean, it turns out to be a really, really important thing. So we don't have to make, any more points. We can let this one be a short one. We are recording this the day before our Patreon appreciation dinner in SoCal. So Tim's flying out in a couple of hours.
This is true.
Are you wearing the baby blues today?
No, I just woke up and put a sweatshirt on.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're going to, what dress clothes are you bringing?
Dress clothes?
Yeah.
I'm
for
bring
you.
A dress.
Fantastic. Thank you. So brothers and sisters, hope this is helpful. Keep the feedback coming. We're so blessed and grateful to be a part of a community that is more of a conversation than we would have ever expected. So love to know your thoughts. Appreciate you guys very much. Till next time.
In the future.
Live long and prosper. The force will be with you always.
Always.
Jesus says, I will never leave you and forsake you. I mean, those are all good ones.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.